Hello marketer, it's Ty here bringing you another episode of Lean Mean Marketing Teams. I have the pleasure today of welcoming Leigh, Principal Designer at Meld Studios, onto the show. Nick is a strategic product and service design leader, thinker, trainer and practitioner. From backyard startups through agencies, education and the corporate sector, he spent over 25 years designing and leading teams to create digital and customer experiences and artifacts across a broad spectrum of industries, platforms and brands. And today's topic is a hot one. We're talking about design and CX. After delving into Nick's fascinating career path, we unpack the meaning of design in 2021, how it intersects with CX, and then we dive deep into the many disciplines of design, from experience design to service design through to UX and UI. The big topic of the show, though, is where to start when establishing a CX and experience design function inside your organization. What roles to hire for, what capabilities to look for, and how to get your executive on side, from the business case through to the support you'll need to make it work. With research demonstrating the enormous impact that being customer-centric can have on your organization, marketers can no longer see CX as a nice to have. The time is now to start building your in-house capability. As always, there's a lot of content covered in the show, so you may want to get those notes from our website so you have all the tips, strategies and resources in a neat summary PDF. Dylan on the team listens back to the show and creates a cheat sheet for you with all the juicy bits. Just head to growthgenerators.io, head to the podcast section, look out for this podcast and download the notes. And if you like this episode, you may want to check out other great episodes on CX and the importance of customer centricity, like episode 29 with Chris Taylor, CXO at Movember, episode 28 with Louise Ayres from Vanguard, episode 23 with Joel Goodsir, and episode 14 with Rosemary Martin when she talks about building the CX function at Flybys. Thank you, and I hope you enjoy the show.
Welcome to Lean Mean Marketing Teams with Ty Hayes, where you'll hear from leading CMOs and thought leaders about what it takes to create a high-performance marketing team. This podcast is brought to you by Growth Generators, a consulting firm that helps CMOs design and build modern marketing teams that drive growth. If you need help optimizing your marketing team, head to growthgenerators.io. Now, let's get on to the show.
Welcome, Leigh, Principal Designer at Meld Studios, to the Lean Mean Marketing Teams podcast.
Thanks very much, Ty. Great to be here.
Yeah, and I was just looking back at our LinkedIn profiles to see how long we've known each other, and it's been 10 years since we worked together as associate directors at Curtin Uni back in the day. Feels like a lifetime ago now. We've had good times together, went to a few conferences and attended and presented and stayed in touch as our careers have taken different paths. And I know I've relied on you as a sounding board for me a few times throughout my career. I've got a deep respect for you as a professional design leader and a friend. So I'm really looking forward to another fun chat today, albeit without a beer or coffee in our hand in this time, but with record lights on and a few listeners tuning in.
Very kind of you, Ty. Yeah, it is amazing, isn't it? 10 years have flown, but I think early on we established an alignment of minds and thinking, which has always been super impressive. Yeah, so I appreciate that.
Yeah, and maybe incredible experience. I thought for today you'd have some great insights to share on, firstly, just helping our audience understand what design means today, how it's evolved and the various kind of categories, frameworks and methodologies, how it fits into the broader scheme of CX or customer experience management, and why marketing teams need to become more customer-centric and design-led. And lastly, if they're thinking of building in-house CX capability, how they go about that and get started, as well as when and what to look for in external providers. How's that sound?
Sounds good. It's really interesting that you've hit me up at this time because it's something we're talking about as a company and how we better connect for our mission, which is to improve the lives of everyday people through doing good design, and talking about customer experience is the language that we perhaps should be using a little more than design-centric language. So I'm happy to try and break through those barriers and find something common to talk about.
Awesome. Let's get into it. As with many designers and marketers, you've got an interesting career journey yourself. To kick things off, why don't you tell us what you've been up to over the last 25 years?
Well, let me try and keep this short and sweet. The summary is I've jumped the fence many times. I've worked corporate and agency. I finished uni with an honours degree in business, and I did actually major in marketing, although there's a large strategy component in that. And I missed my chance to do in the UK what we call the milk round, where you get the graduate job in marketing. And instead, I disappeared off to Canada for 6 months to do a working holiday. And when I came back, I found myself struggling to find a role and ended up in a shed in a back garden, which was my introduction to the reprographics business, which is part of design. So that's pre-press. And it went from there. And all of a sudden I was in a small company and we built a company, and we built a graphic design company, which evolved into a digital company. I was there at the start, learned all the tools back in the good old days of Macromedia and CD-ROMs and DVDs. And we did some amazing work with some household names, which was great for a tiny little company in Stoke-on-Trent. I worked with Doc Martens and Sony and people like that. It was amazing. And then freelanced for a short while, emigrated to Australia. The night I flew, I found out an interview for a role at Curtin University, a publisher and designer. And then I had several roles at Curtin, one of which obviously led to yourself, and we were working together as a team. And that's where I became, if you like, an entrepreneur, because I had some very strong ideas and ideals about digitization. So I think it's fair to say between us, we had a hand in digitizing the university experience, particularly for prospective students who were at the time going through the social media revolution and etc. So that was great. I've done 9 years at Curtin, which I loved, and I left simply because of a little cabin fever. Nothing other than that. Just needed a change from the four walls. Loved the people and the place. Did a couple of years as head of digital at 303 Low, as they were at the time, and had a great little team there doing the digital side of advertising, which was fantastic. And then some changes happened there, and I found myself in Bank West, back in the corporate world. So 6 years at Bank West. Again, I did the entrepreneur thing and built a design team, because I got the accountability of digital sales and service. And much to my astonishment, there were no content people and no designers. I'm like, well, how do we create artifacts and share them? And obviously it was done at the time third party. So that all evolved. We built a digital production team. We then went through a digital transformation, which gave us the opportunity to grow a dedicated design function. So that was amazing to be on that journey. I'll be eternally grateful to Bank West for that. So created the design chapter, went from 0 to a dozen designers, many flavors, mostly UX, which I'll explain later. And then the Bank West journey finished, and I found myself consulting for the last 2 years. And during my consulting role, I did some work with these amazing people called Meld Studios, who I'll explain later. And that has developed into a full-grown relationship, if not marriage. And so now I'm part of Meld. It's been a ride, and I've just run with every opportunity. I loved it.
Fantastic, mate. Amazing experience. In some ways, your career path's almost taken its own journey in terms of the evolution of the meaning of designer, from almost graphic design to solving broader problems.
I feel so, and I'll try and explain that later, because it's become apparent to me the one thing that stayed true throughout my career is the belief in what design is and can do. And that has stayed absolutely true in every role, in every company, whichever side of the fence, whichever flavor. And I think that I've stuck by that, and that's what's led the way and led me to the path that I'm here. You know, I haven't resisted. I've run with every opportunity.
Yeah, brilliant. So when asked what do you do as principal designer at Meld, then what's your response?
That's an interesting one, because we've been talking about that. So we have a lot of principals. Meld is a super interesting company. They are Australia's first employee-owned trust, which is basically like a collective of like-minded people. So we don't have a pyramid type hierarchy. Yes, there's three founders, the three who started this role, but they always had a view that it's a sum of its parts, and we need to have a legacy and what happens as we roll forward. So it's like a collective of professionals. So principals are lead designers who can basically lead, run, curate, deliver, and talk about their own projects, execute, as well as go and develop the business and fly the flag of the kind of problems that design can solve. So I'm a generalist, if you like, but to be a principal, you've got to have 20 plus years. I think the difference is from being a dedicated designer to being a principal. Dedicated designer will deliver and do. A principal has to make the broader connections with a company, project manage the relationships. It's what we call the project around the project. So the project is doing the work, but all the other stuff is equally as important. You know, the change management, the mindsets, the culture. If you can't take the client with you and influence a bit of change and build capability along the way, I'm going to be as successful. You've just done a piece of work, dropped it, and run to the next. So that's where principals try and lead a bit more and grow our impact.
And then expanding on that a little bit to the term design, which looking at Google Trends studies has increased in popularity somewhat over the last few years and has different meanings, I think, to different peoples depending on what industry they're in. But from your perspective, what do you think design encompasses today?
Small question. So I think design is complex and a little misunderstood, and I think that's possibly the fault of designers. A few of us agree that on talking. With many professions, you develop your own language, okay? So it can get complex and you can get specific about the things that you do. and it often gets a bit woolly until others just tune out. So I think as designers, we don't always do ourselves our own best favors. But I'd suggest that design, for myself, somebody asked me at a forum, I think you were there, what is design? And I said, well, what isn't design? And I think every purposeful product, service, or interaction, if it's been purposefully created to do a thing, it's been designed. A pen or a lamppost or the desk I'm sitting at or the headphones I'm using, everything has been designed. But we tend to think of it as the visual creation, if you like, but it's so much more than that. So I love the mission that Meld have got, which is basically designers around purposeful impact and positive changes for all people. So that is about, we create environments, we create companies, we create solutions. But if they're not adding value, then you're not designing properly. And I think I like to hope that design is getting to a point of being reductive. As we finally reached a point where we've worked out the world that we live on is finite, we've got to purposefully and ethically use those resources for the right outcomes. So I think design has become this systemic activity where you are not designing in isolation. For instance, you no longer wish to push out disposable products. Plastic bags have gone the way of what they should have done, right? And all the junk you get at Christmas that's, gifts for the sake of gifts. What value did they add to my life? So I think design is taking more of an ethical lens increasingly to say, how do we purposefully make our lives better, more enjoyable, more productive, and have more impact, but in a conscious, mindful way. So there you go. That's the big headline. Like don't design for waste.
Yeah, I noticed Coles just recently announced it's not going to be doing any plastic toys anymore, which I think is a good thing. Consider the volume of those. But then if you consider like the onion or the Russian dolls of design, there's so many different terms from experience design, HCD, design thinking, service design, through to graphic, digital, UX, UI. How would you peel that onion, or what definitions would you give to describe those different frameworks?
So Humantific did a really good paper on this. I'm not particularly academic. I do read a lot, but I don't cite people a lot. But I remember seeing this amazing article that just summed up everything that we've been thinking. I'd certainly been thinking for years. So design 1.0 is what we all know and understand it to be, which is visual communication. So 1.0 is actually what you call UI, in a way, user interface. The stuff you see, it's brands, it's logos, it's typefaces, it's colors, it's layouts. That's actually just design 1.0. So design 2.0, a lot of people already do and get, and that's product design and service design. It's where you are creating a thing to be utilized, but it's much more encompassing because you have to consider the human interactions. That's where UX and research start to come into things. And you are creating an end-to-end piece. Particularly service design can be quite complex because you've got the different layers of delivery. How do you organize the resources of an organization to actually deliver that? And how do you create an end-to-end service? And, at Meld, we've actually got a view that every product is a service because it doesn't live in isolation. Even the simplest of products are merchandised in some way. Where are they on the shelf? How do I buy them? How do I get them? So everything's a service, right? Design 3.0 is the fun stuff that often you don't realize you're doing. So that's much more complex level of design, but particularly organizational. How do you design change? How do you actually put together that broader ecosystem where change is happening? And it's what you would Kneffen model call complex problems to solve, where there's multiple stakeholders, multiple points of view, multiple delivery channels, everything's going on. So it's a moving feast all the time. So that's where you go 3.0. And then the big one is the scary one, which is 4.0. So people are now beginning to apply design-based methodology for really wicked and problems in the chaotic space, such as climate change and democracy. Okay, so millions of interchangeable parts that roll in a broad ecosystem, butterfly effect stuff. So that's the highest level of design, if you like. And a lot of us are actually playing in the 2 and a lot of the 3, but we still think it's number 1, right?
Yeah.
Get the designer in, make it pretty.
Yeah,
I've done the work.
Yeah. I like that. It's a really useful overview. Thanks for that.
Cool.
So then broadening out to CX, what definition do you like for customer experience? And then we'll talk about how design fits into that.
It's worth, and I'm not pushing anything here, but it's worth checking out a post that Steve Beatty's just put out where he's talking a lot about this. And I put a post out as well because I've been thinking something similar, but Steve's really, really nailed this thing and he's got some strong views. So Steve is the founder of UX Australia. He's also one of the founders of Meld. And he's got a view that CX and the HCD, human-centered design, and service design in particular are often so interchanged that people think they're the same thing. They're absolutely and definitely not, but they are completely interrelated and embedded. So I would suggest, and this is my view only, but it's where my head's at the moment, customer experience is what we all do. It's our consumptive experience of the product or service, the thing. So it's us on the outside coming in. What design, service design, human-centered design all do is they take the backstage, the company, the corporation that's producing that experience and help people understand how to orchestrate it in simple terms. Okay, so the CX is what happens using design amongst many, many other tools is a way to create that experience. I think that the issue, I don't know if it's an issue, that sounds too negative, but the entertainment that we see is CX has become such a pervasive term because it sounds good, but it's been hijacked by a lot of other functions. And often you hear companies bestowing that they've done this customer experience when actually they're focusing on customer service, or they're focusing on sales, or they're doing a marketing campaign that's about customer experience or improving their customer experience. It's not, they're component parts. So you've got to remember that the customer experience ultimately is the experience a customer has with your brand over time. And it often changes. And the customers own the experience because you can't tell them to have an experience. They own it. So that's why where design comes in, to be listening constantly and researching and understanding what's going on. You can orchestrate your experience, particularly through methods such as service design, where you apply different component parts, identify pain points and opportunities, and make the changes to fill those gaps. You know, where there's an issue, where people switch channel, they start on one thing, you just have the most entertaining customer experience with a super large monolithic telecommunications company who shall remain nameless, but the channel pain points were just glaringly obvious. And that's where, you know, service design in particular can come in, identify that and help a company do something to resolve it, and thereby improving the customer experience. That makes sense?
Yeah, it does. Makes sense. And I think build on that or provide another view, which it's very similar. One definition I've seen from CXPA is, like what you said, the perception that customers have of an organisation formed based on interactions across all touch points, people and technology over time. So I like that. And then CX management, to your points around how you can help orchestrate that, is a set of practices an organisation employs to meet or exceed customers' expectations. So very broad in definition and meaning, and not as narrow as some people do confuse it around customer service or, you know, a slice of the experience through digital channels. It's much broader based.
And look, this is not a criticism at all, because it's incredibly hard to do.
Yeah, that's right.
You know, it's gone from, think of the complexity of the world 30, 40 years ago, and, you know, the single media channels and often single purchasing points, and now everything fractured. So you've got to be a puppet master to get this right. So that's where it's given rise to a new set of services that can help orchestrate this stuff.
The CXPR, I thought, is also useful as well. It talks about 4 key interrelated elements. So that culture of customer centricity, so coming down to that, you know, how do you embed that across the entire organisation? The holistic alignment of systems and structures in the quest for customer experience excellence. So like you talked about the challenge of aligning an organisation and almost going inside out to go, how do we structure to deliver this customer experience? The realisation of rewards. So how do you link the customer experience to better business performance? But then lastly, the evolution of business practices through a focus on customer needs and engagement. So actually changing the way your organisation designs and delivers experience based on that feedback and that insight and that learning, rather than just making something and putting it out there and hoping it'll stick.
And I'd suggest through lived experience that there's a chasm and a gulf between the doing CX because we have to, because it's the way to serve customers, and doing CX because We want to.
Yeah.
That is a canyon, that one.
Yeah.
So anyway, I think we'll talk about that next, probably.
Yeah. So then, and we've kind of touched on it, but any other further thoughts on how design fits into CX then?
I was reflecting on this, and I remember when I first, heard of marketing way back at uni, back in the last century. And I'll never forget this little story about, I think it was Scandinavian Air Services were one of the sort of originators of marketing as a practice. But it all started out with understanding the customer. And I feel that may have got lost over time as we've automated marketing and we've sort of all snapped back to this salesy approach and, let's layer it with jam and cream and get the creatives in to sell this thing for us. It's all right. The essence of marketing is so true and so real. And people like Seth Godin still stick by that. It's about understanding of customer needs. And how do you do that? It's not just market research. It's now particularly experience research. And one of the bigger realms that's coming up is UX research. You're seeing more and more as a role. How do people consume and see that? So I think that's where design can really leverage this. But also design is a methodological approach, big word, but it is a structured approach. It's not airy-fairy creative. It's a step-by-step to take that understanding and those insights and action them and deliver them in the right way. Okay? Because again, as humans, we are hardwired for problem solution. That's why we're so damn successful in taking over the planet, right? Here's the thing I can do about it. In today's complex world, there's so much more going on that problem solution is often not the right answer. I mean, why do we still have products and services that don't work? Why do we still have massive projects that don't deliver? Because problem solution is not the answer. So design brings in this flavor and this opportunity to not assume you have the answer, but to assume that you can learn along the way and you can generate a significant amount of potential to solve a problem and then experiment and test and learn and solve an aspect of it in a particular way. And now you know something new. So it's quite egoless design if done right. We often get dragged into projects where it's, tell me what I already know or tell me what I want to know. And you can feel it from the start. I'm going to warn you now that the way we actually do things, if we stay true to how it is, you're going to learn some things that you knew, but you're going to learn some ways to solve them that you probably didn't know or were expecting, because customers are fickle and they will, you have to make a thing first. You have to prototype. You have to test it. You have to understand if your solution to the customer problem will actually land or not. And that's why I like to, really make the point that design is actually de-risking. Why would you go forward and spend millions of dollars potentially of product development in the vain hope it will work? There was a story from Ford in the early 80s who did this with the Ford Escort, and they went out and did all this market research and spent $1 billion delivering exactly the same vehicle that they already had in market. And it's like, because you didn't get the insight right and you just actually played back and gave people what they already had. You didn't do a Steve Jobs and gave them what they didn't know they needed to solve their problems. So yeah. Anyway.
Thanks. Talk about what design is, how it fits into CX. So let's talk about why marketing teams need to be more customer-centric and design-led and how they can build their internal capabilities. So, there's an array of reports out there demonstrating the value that being customer-centric and design-led delivers for organizations. But what do you think is the biggest why that explains why building this capability is a must-have and not a nice-to-have?
The hand grenade I like to roll under a table before we ever start a conversation is usually, how do you know it's going to work? And you'll get a campaign, you'll get a product, you'll get a service idea, you'll get a service optimization, and you just got to have an honest conversation in the first place. How do you know it's going to work? Because it's often, conviction, it's often prediction. Sometimes you can be smart and have a business case with a load of numbers that look amazing and have the reflection with a few people a few times. When did any business case ever deliver the cost benefits almost by black magic made up on this paper? It never did. So I think the why is, and I think I'd already explained the process, is because design doesn't assume. Design will help people understand along the way. And this is why design is so well connected in parallel with agile. Just learn as you go. Just don't assume, have an open mind, and it will help you execute and de-risk far safer and more incremental ways than you would otherwise take these giant gambles. And it's nice when you've got this $1 million budget sitting there and thinking, yeah, let's go spend it and generate some sales, and does it? so yeah, design is one of your secret weapons, one of, because there's many more are going to be in there. The big why is because it's going to connect you to your humans.
Yeah.
But not just your external humans, your internal humans.
Yeah. Merging of CX and EX. And I think some of the stats I've seen, there was a good HBR article, value of customer experience quantified 2014. And, this had figures of customers that have best past experience spend 140% more, 4.5 times more likely to pay a price premium, 3.6 times more likely to buy additional products. And there was one from Adobe and e-consultancy that said it can double revenue within 36 months. So there's
Adobe one. Yeah, the Adobe one I remember, and I've got the graph somewhere, but it was from 2016, and it was actually market value. So it was saying companies with a design culture are, I don't know if it was NASDAQ or is the whatever the other 500 is, have experienced in the last decade 70% more growth than the other top 500 companies. So that was Nike and Apple. And people like, so design culture is driving success. The stats are unequivocal, I think.
So then if an organization wants to become more customer-centric and design-led and they're looking to build their in-house capability, where should they start?
You referenced in your notes before this, the famous British All Council Double Diamond, which we still stand by, still works. There's an evolution of it that came out earlier this year. I think it was even last, which is really, really good. And it talks more about systemic design. But if we keep things simple, it's worth your listeners looking up the Double Diamond, because it does work. It changes the problem solution to problem problem definition and then solution, and it breaks it apart in 2 diamonds. And we all refer to comedically, the first diamond is make the right thing, and the second diamond is make the thing right. I think it was McKinsey did a global survey, and they worked out that in terms of organizational budget and spend, about 3% is on the first piece of discovery, which is the first half of the first diamond, and then the second piece is 2%. So only 5% of global budgets that they saw were spent on making the right thing, and then all the money's in make the thing right delivery, right? Which is why agile and product teams have taken over the world, right? All this money on devs and making stuff. So make the thing right, everybody's well versed at. There's some brilliant apps, there's some brilliant sales channels, there's some brilliant products, and we're really, really good at making things. But as I said, I'd love to challenge that and say, how many people are making the right thing? So if you wanted to make a start, make the thing right, make the right thing, and then make the thing right. That's 2 people. It's not 1 designer quite often that can do the entire spectrum. So you probably need to start with the UX researcher who can do the first diamond, surface everything, make the connections, go deep, understand complex problem spaces, understand interactions, understand emotions, understand everything that's going on, make the right thing before you move anywhere. And then it's your UX designer or even the UI designer right at the end that is the make the right thing. Somebody who can really take that understanding and understand how to execute it in the right way. So they're the 2. You need at least a human for each to even get things off the ground.
Yeah.
And of course they work together. And if you get a unicorn that can do the lot, get ready to fork out the money.
Wow, there's been a lot covered in this interview so far. As a marketing leader, we know you like to spend more time taking action and less time taking notes. So we've got you covered. We packaged up all the tips, strategies, and resources from each episode into some beautifully crafted notes just for you. Not ugly AI-generated transcripts, but real notes taken by a real person on our team. To grab the notes, head on over to growthgenerators.io, look out for this podcast episode and download the notes. But be quick, they're only live for a few weeks after the episode airs. Now, back to the show.
Yes. Job market is just a little hot at the moment for these kind of roles.
That was the next question, wasn't it? So what's the challenge? How do you open that door? Hiring is a challenge right now. I get 3 approaches a day from people saying, can you help me out? Do you know anybody? The market's so hot right now because people are understanding and building in-house capability. So what do you need to attract that? Well, obviously there's an entry price. Not everybody's all about the dollars, but I would suggest from the discussions that we have as colleagues and practitioners and friends, what's every designer looking for? Purpose. They want to be able to contribute to good outcomes. The last thing a designer wants is to be a cog in the wheel, because unfortunately for us, we have creative brains and we think bigger than that. You can't shove them in little boxes and say, here's a purpose, here's a strategy, here's a thing. We've already made the decisions, just make it. Oh no, that's not what I was thinking. Can you make it again? That's going to very quickly get people out the door. Everybody, there's a lot of movement right now in our circles because people are not changing for money. They are changing for purpose because they're not feeling valued. And they're feeling they can make bigger contributions and do more interesting work. And again, at this kind of higher level, seniors and principals have influence and have discussions, ask the hard questions. Is this ethical? Are we doing the right thing by our company, customers, and planet here? Having the value be seen and heard. There's nothing more frustrating than having definite qualitative and quantitative evidence in front of you and having the decisions about how to action that completely taken out of your hands. So lead and principal designers are very much parallel with product owners, and they're up there with making the decision to proceed or not, persist, pivot, or perish. It's like, if you want to get good designers on board, give them a say, give them a place, and give them purpose to work towards a goal.
Love that. And it comes back to your points earlier around making sure they're diamond and they're not just given the second diamond to execute. They're involved in the research and, defining that, using that discovery, seeing it firsthand and synthesizing it, and then working out the strategy to implement and given the accountability and empowerment to do that.
That's what leads to burnout with designers and frustration, because they're like, just make the thing that we've decided. And then you sit there going, it's not going to make a difference. Yeah. It's not going to give the operator or the person benefits. I see it, and I've got this is not a controversial or unknown rant from me, but I really significantly and seriously criticize enterprise software. It's this enormous behemoth of a system that runs complex organizations, and I'm still yet to experience and enjoy an enterprise system because they seem to be built devoid of human input. And I say that, not from a ranty point of view, but from having to support people in getting through doing processes in their jobs that are delivered by digital enterprise systems and are often so completely complex and just not intuitive, and they are friction, and they are costing companies millions of dollars in productivity and sheer frustration in being unable to complete a task, say submitting your expenses. When it's not built for and with people, when it's not co-designed, I don't believe it's solving the problem. It's creating further problems. Anyway, slight tangent. Let's get back on course.
Yeah, no, I think, we touched on the double diamond, the discover, define, develop, deliver, the purpose of each one. You mentioned kind of the research at the beginning, the designer at the end to make that happen. In terms of that research piece, you mentioned the UXer. Yeah, in terms of that role, getting the right position to set that up, there's obviously different skill sets in UX and in research, whether it's insights or digital experiences, but what kind of person are you looking for? And obviously it would depend on the organization in terms of what research is required, but typically, and I know it's a tough question because the background of designers varies so much, but I've looked at organizations, they might put in like a CX, an insights kind of manager, and then UX designer, and like you say, slightly different roles, but that either UX or that insights or CX analyst position, what's critical in that role in terms of the job they're going to be doing and the background they might have? And then we can maybe touch on the designer and double click on that a bit more.
Yeah, it's a super interesting question to solve. I actually came from reprographics and graphic design, and then you go back upstream, if you like, to understand, well, who are we making this for and what do they need? So I think it's innate curiosity. Research does millions of really incredible techniques, of which I barely know any. What you need is people who are curious, who are empathetic, who are comfortable having conversations with people, but are just damn good listeners. That's research boils down to it, because there's so many flavors of research. There's observational, there's contextual, there's one-to-one, there's deep stuff, and there's obviously the more challenging type of research, which is with sensitive topics and complex environments, a lot of which Meld gets into and is really challenging stuff. A lot of designers talk about research burnout, where, acquired empathy, where they're dealing with stressful subjects, really difficult. So there's resilience, but I think it's just strong curiosity, strong communication skills. A lot of communication is absolutely paramount in order to be able to articulate and synthesize these insights and opportunities and observations into actionable work, right? That's what qual is. But it's interesting, a lot of people are entering the trade these days, if you like, as designers, from very, very diverse backgrounds and spaces. They are not in any way visual. In fact, we have a lot of people in our company who are like, can you just present this for me? Because I'm no good on that front. So I can't draw this or style this. And it's cool because they've come from behavioral psychology, they've come from counseling roles, they've come from project manager roles, they've come from everywhere. Basically, people who are used to dealing with a large amount of data and making that data understandable and doing something with it. So that's where that side comes from. And then when you do need the more of the UX and the UI, is that skill to be able to translate that into an interface that people can intuitively use and understand. And by that, I don't just mean visually, because there's a lot of talk now, there's a lot of voice design. We need to design inclusively. What's the assumption? Everybody can see perfectly well. You need to have that inclusive lens. If I'm designing for the elderly, for instance, my mother-in-law has her phone on extra zoom and I can't read anything on it, but we have to design information and forms and interactions and processes to be delivered in that way. So UX designer has to have a significant amount of understanding of the space they're dealing with, the people they're doing. They're not just creating screens. That's UI, the ones who can polish it and add the layer of branding and add the layer of consistency, because brand is not surface at all. Brand is deep. It is right through, and it's the essence of who you are. And if you make a promise, say, to be an inclusive company that serves all, and then you provide them with systems that people can't use, you've just not delivered on your brand. I'm sorry. Who's at the pinnacle of this? To give some examples, people like Nike and Apple are incredibly good. You get the essence of Apple's products, even if they might be post-peak. But anyway, the physical store is exactly the same as the operating system, is exactly the same as the boxing. The packaging is exactly the same as the support service. If you've ever had a problem with an Apple product and you try and get it resolved, it's seamless, it flows, they resolve it. So the essence of the brand comes through, and that has had a whole bunch of industrial designers, experienced designers, UX researchers, understanding the humans. It's just an incredible example of tiering it all into an experience. So
and then when you get into that second diamond, the developing it, delivering, and that's where you might be looking, say, service blueprints, if it's, an organization with services, or experience maps, things like that. What kind of person do you want to look for? What kind of skills do you want in that role? Because like you just said, it needs to be broader than just the digital experiences, but we've talked about service design a little bit today. Do you want to just maybe expand on that and talk about the kind of role you might need for that second diamond?
Yeah. So if we go right to the extreme of it and the sort of the deliver piece, you need designers with technical knowledge to a point, but more to the point, the ability to talk with technical people. Because when it comes to the hard yards of executing, be it implementing some tagging or coding up front end, etc., the ability to talk with highly technical people is an absolute must. And a handful of people who are absolute geniuses, who just have this ability to converse right from the CEO right down to the front end dev who only speaks to people through their keyboard. It's just that incredible ability. So broad emotional intelligence there is a big one. But going back to sort of the service maps and service blueprints, again, that's not visual capacity at all. That is data articulation, that is problem solving, that is affinity mapping and clustering, and it involves seeing patterns and giving those patterns sense, and then prioritizing those patterns into action. You create an enormous blueprint, and it's a very overwhelming amount of information. That's the point at which it's very easy to tune out, because it feels overwhelming. There's so much we have to do here. So, and I'm going through a project with this at the moment. We've got hundreds and hundreds of recommendations. So now we've got to do that analysis point of turning that into actionable insights. And it's like, we can see all this stuff. How on earth do we deliver on it? Well, we've got to mutually go through. So you need great stakeholder skills and engagement, because you're doing a job for them. You're not telling them what to do. It's their work. It's about organizing that and helping them make sense and go, right, there's so many things we can do. How big are they and what impact are they going to have? So how long is it going to take? And organizing. So you need that organizing mind as well to help make the critical decisions and support the company you're working with and for to do the right thing to get this thing done. Because everybody wants early value. Everybody wants quick wins. Worst phrase in the world. And they just got to help them get it done. So it's the practitioner side.
Okay. So then what other support is needed from the top? You've identified some roles that you need, you want to implement it. How do you get it over the line and get that kind of executive support, or what do you need from your leaders?
I'll give you one word: trust. That's where, if executive level want to get this stuff done, they have to delegate that trust and assume that there's people with significantly more time to deliver on their vision. Right. So it's like they've got to have trust to say, because when you're answering a problem or you're creating something new or you're building a company, everybody's got this picture in their mind of what great looks like. And we all do. You just project it outwards. And sometimes when that thing is then built and done, it's not what you're expecting. So the ability to perhaps let go a bit, but, have that trust. That's what execs can do, is empower teams, by hiring the right people and working with them and having a two-way conversation. And then when you get new information, act on it and empower people to do. That's the big thing. Execs are told to control. That's their role. They have KPIs. But I think we're seeing a new generation who are really understanding that all of that talent to execute doesn't have to lie with them. And it's a lot smarter to amplify yourself through brilliant others. So it's the old famous thing, hire somebody smarter than you, so that's the executive piece, right?
And I think it depends on the maturity of the organization and how much of a burning platform they see CX and design as well, right? And who the board is, the CEO, whether they've come from a marketing or customer-centric or empathy kind of led background, the personality type might be. I think it can really depend and vary. I think, we mentioned some of the stats earlier, which should help make the case. But I think, often there's a good Forrester article I read around the mistake that a lot of CXs or marketers make, which is, and they might go to the board or the CEO and say, we want to do this CX thing, and there might be this benefit. And the Forrester guy, it was Harley Manning, suggested we reverse that and almost lead with the value first. And, to your point earlier, whether the business case will come true or not, but I still think it was a useful proposition that you start with, we propose to do A to improve B, which will bring us economic benefit C at a cost of D. CNE's example was proposed to redesign our B2B customer service portal to make it easier for our clients to fix our own tech problems, to save us $50 million per year by avoiding road trips by our tech support teams at a cost of $1.5 million. Now, I realise if you don't have the CX capability or the insights, you may not have that data to begin with, but I just thought that was useful to frame it with the benefit and what you're going to deliver first and the cost later, rather than we just want to stand up a CX function because it's the latest trend.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's on designers to articulate that as well. It's on designers to help move the company forward, to not be vague about it and not be cryptic and say, well, I'm thinking if we did this, this might happen. It's about designers partnering with everybody else who is better at quantifying to actually sell that vision and sell that agency, if you like, to move things forward. So I completely agree.
I just think it's a challenge, like for the marketers at the beginning, to just build the capability. Like I do work at Growth Generators, helping CEOs and CMOs transform teams, and building CX capability is often part of those recommendations. But just to make that case, for all the reasons we've discussed, what is design? What is CX? What is CX management? What benefit is this going to deliver? Like, it's still so new. Coming back to Google Trends, the search trends on CX and design peaked in November last year, 2020. So obviously the pandemic has made this more of a burning platform than ever as companies realize they need to compete, solve problems for customers, be more kind of outside in than inside out. But that's still a big change if that's only just peaked and they're used to operating from a product, service, business unit focus. This is our strategy. This is how we're going to deliver. So is there anything else you've learned through your career in positioning this, or any other support required to get it over the line?
Another massive question.
Put you on the spot.
Yeah, we didn't prepare for that one, did we? The fact that it peaked last year tells you a lot, but the design is not just going to solve it. I think the worst thing we're seeing is, and I'm about to do a say on this again as a blog post, design thinking took over the world. But I won't forget this brilliant cartoon, which was from a Dutch service design company. And it was two folks walking out of a room, screwing up Post-it notes, dropping them in the bin and going, well, that was nice, wasn't it? Back to the day job. Design will not be the silver bullet, and a one-day course in design thinking is not going to change your culture and mindset in any way, shape, or form. But I think design opens a door, and if somebody can open a door to let the right kind of design and that spectrum of design start to come in and influence the culture and mindset of a company, then you start to build your capability, because designers are now coming through the door, reconnecting you with your audience. I always used to talk about the gap, and I always used to think it was incredibly egotistical of companies to be out there making things and trying to flog them to customers, and also tell their resources within inside their company this is what they wanted to go and flog to their customers. And I used to sort of sit there and say, what about the poor bugger on the receiving end? What say have they got in it, the customers? So I always used to talk about design closing that gap and really creating the voice of the customer within inside the company. And it's not a VOC thing, VOC system for listening to sentiment and measuring sentiment and blah, 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 blah. That's customer service. No, by voice of the customer, I mean the genuine co-design of opening the doors to colleagues who execute and customers who receive and procure and buy from you. By aligning that intent and that intention through design, you're going to be doing a better job, because you've closed the gap and you're making products and services that matter, and you're making them in a way that can be used and utilized by customers, and you're creating mutual value and benefit. That would be my say. If we can sell that message, a more ethical message of stop making stuff people don't want. I think fossil fuel companies are kind of getting that message right about now. Beyond petroleum, they suddenly realize what we don't sell oil and gas, we sell energy. We sell energy that powers things. Maybe there's some different ways of doing that. So yeah, get designers in, close the gap, understand your intent, and execute on your intent.
Like that. And I think it reminds me of Jeff Bezos and he's the customer at the boardroom table, like just that mentality. Is there a chair there for the customer? And how do you bring that voice into the boardroom or into the organization? I think you actually sent me a webinar with Seth Godin recently, and he said the first thing he'll do is go out and get some vox pop, some footage of your customers, telling them what they love about your product, what they hate about your product, cut it into a 5-minute video and take it to your board or show them. How do you keep bringing the customer front and center? Because in a lot of organizations, they're so far removed, especially from executive or higher levels. They're not front facing. They're not in the bank branches or the retail or at the coal face. So how do you bring that coal face back up?
And provocation is a useful tool. It's not causing trouble sometimes, and that's one thing. I think we're going to talk about this later, but I've matured in is I'm very good at causing trouble, but I cause it trouble in a better way these days through maturity and experience, right? It's easy to go ranting in, but if you remember years ago, we definitely had a discussion, and I'm digging into my brain cells here, but I proposed at one point we would print up 5-foot-tall personas of students and bring them into every meeting to get the focus on them. Are we doing this for the students? Have they had their say? Where is the voice of the student? We've done that many, many times in other roles and said, just as Jeff Bezos said, if they're absent and they're not in here and they're not represented, then we're probably not doing the right thing. So the provocation can absolutely be in there to encourage the right action.
Brilliant. And then in terms of how this CX team or design team engages with the rest of the organization, any tips on that in terms of where they should be located perhaps, or where you've seen them located, whether it's in digital product sales or marketing, whether that matters, or just how they engage and the importance of engaging with the whole organization?
Yeah, again, another big curly one, right? I've always said that digital sits at the bottom of the canyon between marketing and IT. It's never understood where it should play. But I think that, again, one word: rhythm. Design is not a single shot. It is continuous. Good folks that I know, Christy over at Telstra Purple, they talk about dual stream, where you've always got discovery ahead of delivery. So I think aligning design and understanding that design is a loop. It's continuous and it's strategic. It's at one level, it's up here listening constantly and understanding the ever-changing environment, the context within which you're working, but it's also continuous in a sort of a lean startup way. It's like, now I've made a thing and it's in the wild. What do I know now? It's not done. And it frustrates people, because they want design to be done. We've done a thing. Yay, high fives, it's done. That's the start. So I guess two things. Don't ever throw research over the fence for others to build. You've got to live with your research and see those insights turn into execution, right? So keep it through. And likewise, never ever throw the designer in at the end. I think I've already said it. The largest frustration is style me this thing which we've already decided. That just kills designers. So I don't know if I've specifically answered the question, but designers throughout, and it operates at every end of the spectrum continually. Bezos talks about day one. I like to think about day two. Now you've done it, what happens next?
What next?
Which obviously becomes day one again. I get his point. Products are released to market, and we talk to people about. I've got a bunch of solutions we're working with a client to deliver at the moment. And I'm like, please assign a product owner. This isn't a one-hit release. This is the start. When you make this thing to solve this problem, it's the start. Right? Off you go.
I always remember one of your phrases that are puppies for Boxing Day, not just Christmas.
I think I've retired that one.
Well, I just brought it. Excellent. Well, then, nearing the fast five, but before we get to that, so we've talked about how to build the internal capability. When is it appropriate then to bring in outside help, or how can that be useful in terms of building that capability, offering strategic advice?
Look, that's a really interesting one. Obviously, a lot of companies are building a lot of internal capability, which we totally support. I think that's amazing. The work that Meld in particular do, there's an enormous focus on capability building. No consultants and a lot of external companies, management consulting firms, etc., do not certainly ever want to do dump and run. They don't want to come in, do a project, say, here you go, bye, here's the bill. That doesn't feel good for anybody. So I think consultants can come in, and you should certainly leverage them because they do this stuff every day to really focus on partnering, shadowing, get your people to learn that capability. Because especially in terms of design consulting, human-centered design, service design, we're selling our religion, right? We're at the Church of Design, and we want everybody to sign up to that and subscribe. So we want to get in there and maybe sample and help people do a discrete thing. If that then proves itself with the right outcomes, you can then take that forward and go, well, hey, maybe we can do that again. Again, I would suggest consultants in at the start who help build internal capability. Your team starts to build, you possibly want expert partners off to the side. Again, firms like us, because it's not just us, a lot of them also do coaching and training and ongoing. Use us as a benchmark and check in. You're a year into this, give us a call. How are you going? We'd love to know. We'd love to know how your design practice is maturing. That's brilliant. Whatever we can do to grow that capability and help you be more customer centric and help you keep leveraging the voice of the customer. Absolutely. Just get on the phone, seriously. So I think that's it. And I think, the watch out said, don't go too hard too soon. Everybody needs to experiment and toe dip, and also do some thin slices, quarantined examples, and see what happens, because it may not work, or you may need to tweak your approach to deliver on a broader scale. So everybody struggles with overarching change all hitting at once in a wave. So you change a bit of a piece, and then you use that as the sort of the Trojan horse, if you like, to say, well, look over here, these folks did this thing and it worked out like this. Do you want to try that as well? Because they can teach you, train the trainers like that.
Fantastic. Well,
that makes sense.
That does. And mate, we've covered a lot of ground, and we are now just about out of time. We've just got time for the fast five. Are you ready?
Okay, try me.
What do you believe are 3 essential capabilities or criteria of a high-performance marketing team?
Number 1, sensing. Mm-hmm. So that's rich and continuous data and insight gathering. Number 2, be agile. That's a small a. So that's adaptive and ethical as you go. You've got to run with the punches. And thirdly, empathy. Have a genuine, shared and inclusive voice.
Mm-hmm. Love it. And how would you describe your team's culture in one word? Maybe the culture at Meld?
Open.
Open, yeah. What is one metric you've successfully used to track and measure team performance?
Trust.
Mm-hmm. And what's one skill or capability you've learned recently you wish you'd developed much sooner in your career?
I think I hinted at it. It's the ability to provocate in the right way. It's emotional intelligence, right? But I think also reflection. I think I'm getting a little better at the retros, a little better at reflecting how did this work and what might I do next time. But you've got to make space for that, and it's really hard.
It's hard, isn't
roll from one to another.
I know, yeah. And lastly, what book or books have you read that you found yourself recommending to others, or you think our audience would gain value from?
Reinventing organizations. It's my new gospel. Command and control no longer works in a complex and chaotic environment. Collective knowledge and ownership does. Collective accountability and responsibility is going to take you far more places than a hierarchy which no longer serves today's complex environment. So Frederick something or other.
That's all right. We'll look it up and link it up in the show notes. And where can people go to get in touch with you or learn more about Meld Studios?
Easy. meldstudios.com.au or nick@meldstudios.com.au.
Brilliant, mate. Well, awesome to catch up. Thanks for shedding so much light again on such a complex topic around design and CX and all the elements within it, and how to stand up an internal CX team, the watch outs, the elements for success. I think we've covered a lot of ground in the hour, and you've given a ton of value to our audience, and just great to see you again. And hopefully next time it's over a beer or a coffee. So thanks, Nick.
Always good to share, and I always learn so much from you as well, Ty. So I hope it all made sense, and happy to talk about it if it didn't. And share the love with people. All right. Thank you so much for the time.
Thanks, mate.
You've been listening to Lean Mean Marketing Teams with Ty Hayes. If you love the show, please remember to hit subscribe so that you can discover more tips and strategies to build a high-performance marketing team. And if you're feeling generous, please tell someone about the show who you think would benefit. We're on a mission to help CMOs build their dream team and enable marketers to do their best work. And we appreciate your help in spreading the word.